Welcome to the Left Wing podcast in association with Aldi. Spend €30 in store for a chance to win €50,000 for your primary school. More chances, more prizes, more reason to enter.
They were O'Driscoll, Morgan, extra man is Fitzgerald. Oh, Fitzgerald is cutting back inside! Leinster have another! Darcy, O'Driscoll through the legs, Rob Carney out to Fitzgerald again, stamped and score, number 2 for him.
Hello and welcome to the Left Wing Independent.ie's rugby podcast in association with Aldi. I'm Will Slattery, delighted to be joined in studio as always by Luke Fitzgerald and Fergus McFadden. Lads, hello.
Will, how are you getting on?
How's things?
I'm good.
Enjoy the weekend's rugby?
Well, I didn't. You know, it's bad enough that Ireland have gone down in flames to get another World Cup. Now I have to adjust my mindset to living possibly in a world where England have won not one but 2 World Cups in my lifetime. I remember watching the original one with Woodward and the lads and thinking, okay, this is about as bad as it gets. Then 16 years on, Eddie Jones comes along. But to be fair, at this stage, I was actually happy to see them win that game, but I don't know if I'm ready to see them, you know, with the Webb Ellis Trophy and everything that comes with it. Like, the lads still getting wheeled out 16 years later.
Do you know what, actually? It did, weirdly enough, right? I probably would have been in the same camp with you. But through the course of, like, doing a few media things here and there the last couple of years, I've actually come in contact with a good few of those guys. Actually, really nice bunch. Like Phil Vickery, lovely guy. Actually, Clive Woodward's a lovely fella as well. Like, all people who I would have been thinking.
Yeah. Mike Tyndall's a nice fella.
Mike Tyndall's a good guy
It's
as
not
well.
so much that, it's just when they're doing their puntry, everything's always, it's like, especially Woodward, it's like, of course, in 2003 or when I won the World Cup or when this and that.
But you're always going to come back, like, because people always want to hear about, like, you've reached the pinnacle of the game. You know what I mean?
Will it be Sir Eddie Jones now as well?
Oh, you have to be from England.
No, you don't. Tony O'Reilly.
Is he? Yes.
Yeah, he is. Yeah. Oh, we just have one of our producers actually trying to. I thought you were able. Obviously not. Maybe Bob Geldof, no?
Is he a sir? Yeah.
Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. Could be. Listen, let's not get into the politics of this thing. Let's not go down that rabbit hole. No, but look, it's an amazing achievement to even get to a final, I think. You know, and look, they've gone the tough route as well. They had a tough group. You know, the Aussies are, you know, they're pretty tough as well.
They'd have beaten all 4 rugby championship teams to win the World Cup.
And then obviously the only caveat is that they didn't get to play the French, which would have brought them a different route. Maybe they would have played Wales earlier, but I don't know. I think they've looked brilliant throughout the competition. I'm not sure anyone would have touched them, you know.
Yeah, it's interesting for to see England get to this stage, because obviously Eddie Jones was always like, judge me on the World Cup. Even when they were winning Grand Slams and going on that long win streak, he was always talking about the World Cup. And now it looks like his kind of master plan or his 4-year grand plan has paid off. You know, they seem to be hitting their peak at the perfect time. You know, what have you made of him over the last 4 years in general? Like, from, you know, obviously you've been playing in and around that this time, like a bit different from Luke, who's maybe been away. What did the current players think of the way?
Peep, isn't it?
Yeah, something like that. Right away, he's gone about his business.
Yeah, it's obviously difficult to know when you're not in their camp, but as a player in the Ireland camp during a couple of those Six Nations when Jones was in charge, you know, I got the feeling talking to the guys that had been on the lines with a few of those guys that, you know, Jones didn't necessarily do that much of the rugby coaching. I think that's kind of widely enough known. But he obviously just had the foresight to put a coaching staff in place that was ideal. And also, I think you mentioned before the show as well there, Will, that there was consistency to a lot of their selections, but there was 1 or 2 big ones that they changed up. You know, the likes of Rob Shaw being taken out, who was a captain for years, and, you know, that back row, Billy Vunipola, I think, is 24, 25, and the 2 lads were 20 and 21. And, you know, for someone that doesn't watch the game much, they probably would have looked at those age profiles before the game and gone, like, who are these guys? What's going to happen?
Neil Francis called them journeymen at the time.
Journeymen before Ireland played England in the Six Nations.
Great point, though, yeah.
It's phenomenal what they did. And it's what Jones has done is he's got a culture going there where he picks his best players, but he picks his best players who are playing the best, because he could have easily also gone with Owen Farrell at 10, and he didn't. He went with George Ford, because George Ford was playing some of his best rugby under Eddie Jones throughout the World Cup, and he just decided to do that, and it worked. I mean, it would, like, in terms of a complete performance by a team at test level at a World Cup, I don't think I've ever seen one as good as that before. It was phenomenal. And if you go through it, there was 2 tries that were disallowed for England. that were rightfully disallowed, fair enough. But again, that's just pressure in the 22 where they should have scored. And then the New Zealand try was a gift, from an overthrow. So it should have really been 20 points.
Yeah, I just thought they were outstanding. And it was I just think it really showed, how a good team, because I still think that's an excellent All Blacks team as well. It just shows you, if you're a few % off in a few facets of the game, you're just done. They'll just make you look really, really bad, and they can dominate you for the entire game. I think if you look at the New Zealand game the week before against Ireland, I think it probably shows up a lot of the same things for me. I was watching the two of them, I just saw lots of similarities, like drop balls from the All Blacks, which you just never see, really never see. And look, that's English pressure as well, but I thought, they performed poorly as well. I thought their defence was so passive. I couldn't believe it. It reminded me of our performance the week before, where every single carry was over the game. I thought their forwards, the English forwards, the way they passed the ball amongst themselves, it reminds me of when Leinster are playing well. It reminds me of when Ireland were playing well in 2018, where I think that kind of Leinster mantra, which I think has fed through, interestingly enough, in some of the media stuff this week, which we'll probably get onto that. But I think those three things, I thought, Jesus, they look so similar to what happened to Ireland last week. And it's amazing how bad you look when you don't get those things right. Just a few % off. That's all it takes. One, every defensive set, not taking one step forward, just sitting there waiting for them to come at you. Guys with good ball carriers and good ball handling, they'll find holes and they'll just make you look very... I thought that first try, I don't know what you thought, Ferg or Will, but geez, that first try, how passive did that look? That looked so easy. No?
Yeah, I know.
I was like, is this a semi-final of a World Cup? I was like, it looks so easy.
It was very good pre-game analysis by the English backroom team, because the All Blacks do have a bit of a soft... Their style of defence is soft. It's up and out. It's not nearly as hard as the likes of the South Africans or the English, or even the Irish team. In fairness,
when they're playing well.
But the Irish team come up hard within the 15s, and then the wingers stay back, and that worked for a season or two. But then teams started to pick that apart, which we discovered at the World Cup. But I think you go through that first try, and it's just, I haven't seen a team as composed for such a big occasion in a long, long time from the very start of the game. There was no easing myself in here. You could kind of see a look in a few of their eyes when they're staring down the haka that it was just a bit of a bomb-proof confidence. They just had a plan going in and they executed it from the first minute till the 80th, and even the bench players that came on, and you're talking about a couple of the similarities between the Irish mistakes that were made against New Zealand the week before, and I completely agree with you. There's ball handling errors, but also the ball getting reefed out of, I think it was in the first 5 minutes, the ball getting reefed out of Laulala's, the tight head's hands from George Ford. Small things like that where you're going, these guys they're just more switched on and up for this match, and that just kind of riddled through the whole team, and the first half was so comprehensive from England. You really felt there was going to have to be something special, one of the all-time great comebacks. I know it was only 10 points at halftime. It was going to have to be one of the all-time great turnarounds to come back and beat them when they were playing that well.
Yeah, and I know Warren Gatland was probably taking the piss when he said, a lot of teams play their final and the semi-final, but with such a comprehensive performance on, beating the All Blacks is always a little extra to beating another team. How do you think in terms of dealing with that? Is it hard to reset and go again so soon? I know it is a World Cup final, so that obviously adds a kind of another element to it, but ordinarily, beating New Zealand is such a big game. You don't really have to go again immediately afterwards. You don't have to reset immediately and get back down to business.
Do you know what, actually? I think it was the manner of the defeat, or the victory, that kind of leads me to believe that that's not going to be an issue. I still think that South Africa will pose them lots of problems if they can manage the pace of the game. I just don't feel like you can bully them around. I thought, if they get their line, if they can produce, they'll need to do it for a large period of the game, which is a challenge. But if they can produce the kind of performance they had defensively, for the first 20 minutes that they did against the All Blacks, they'll cause them problems. They have lots of really, really quality rugby players. That's South African pack. You're just not going to bully them. I even know that that English pack is very, very physical. I just don't think that'll happen against South Africa. So I actually think this could be a tighter game. And I think as well, what was really notable to me was, I think, that selection error that we talked about. I thought that was an unusual selection Sorry, I was talking about another thing on Friday. But I thought the selection of Barrett at 6 was a really unusual one.
You do the left wing on Friday.
Is that another game?
What have you done?
I'm sorry.
How dare you?
Playing away
it
from
all
home,
comes
baby.
out, slip of the tongue. Yeah, sorry.
Who hosted?
I just thought I thought that was a big error, and in hindsight it was interesting. And do you know what as well, what I thought was really classy touch, because I always think there are such PR stunts after the game. Like, it's such, like, it kind of gives me, maybe I'm just a really cynical person, but I did really like that you heard no complaints from the New Zealand camp. You know, there was no moaning about anything. Like, he even, do you know what I really liked about Hansen? Because whatever about all the crap with Eddie Jones and well done England and that, like, you have to say that, otherwise you look like an idiot, right? They didn't mention anything about the referee, who I thought actually rode them a little bit at ruck time. No mention of that. And actually, he stuck by Barrett. You know, he didn't throw him under the bus. He kind of half, you know, someone in the media kind of scrum said something along the lines of, you know, in hindsight, with the damage that the English back row did to your breakdown, was it a good decision to pick Barrett? And he's like, I'm not gonna. You know, how bad would he feel if I just felt it was a really good answer. He said something along the lines of, how bad would he feel if I said that? I said, look, you know, in hindsight, maybe, you know, there was that idea that we had about maybe the line out and the dominance that England had there and how good they are, combating that with Barrett probably didn't work out. But I loved his answer on that one. Just felt like he's come out of it looking really well to me, even though I felt like there's lots of times where I've been saying, you know, he's kind of gruff at times with the media, but I thought that was a brilliant answer. And the way they've dealt with the defeat was brilliant. Like, they looked inwardly and they congratulated England, like, very, very good.
I thought Kieran Reid's reaction was a pretty interesting one, because that was just a genuine reaction. Because when Ireland had beaten them in Chicago and beaten them in Dublin, he was very gracious in defeat, and he kind of was there with a smile on his face, whatever. He looked fully shell-shocked, and he didn't really have much to say to the interviewer. He said well done to England, but he was kind of looking around going, because that All Blacks team, you have to remember, even when Ireland beat them, and like, I guarantee after those games they're like, we'll be able to pick them apart next time. We'll be able to be better than them the next time. I don't think there's anything from that English performance they'd be able to look at and go, we could have done something differently there to beat them. They were actually that good. Like, they went through them at the right time. They went around them. They then when they had done that time when Ford or Farrell put the ball straight in behind Reece, that time he also put the ball in behind Bridge in the first half. Just had them get second guessing, and he had them playing completely outside their comfort zone for most of the game. Certainly the halfbacks did anyway. And that's why they played most of their rugby in the most dangerous part of the field, which is within your own, from the 30-metre line in towards your try line, because they were chasing the game early on. Because if you go through the possession stats, like, if you read the possession stats bar the territory, you'd surely be convinced that New Zealand won that match. But it was down to the game management England had in comparison to the Kiwis. Yeah, like, and even I thought the set piece dominance was just unbelievable. The English maul. I just thought it looked like men against boys. Like, it was really unusual. Like, I thought Barrett would at least kind of provide a bit of, you know, a little bit extra maybe in the scrum, perhaps, you know, and definitely something in the lineup. But Jesus, like, I know they all talk about Borthwick being brilliant there, and he was brilliant for, I think he was Saracens before as well. He did a couple of years at their line, and he was like renowned brilliant, you know. But they just look, is exactly what Ferg said. I just think there wasn't one facet of the game where New Zealand were like, oh well, we had, you know, we kind of had a chance in there. Like, maybe if we, you know, that was something positive to take from it. They had so little of the game. You know, it was, from their perspective, as Ferg said, he looked shell shocked. But you probably would be, and you'd be concerned about where they go from here. Now the age profile is good, but
new head coach. They'd still be like, will they do Mo'unga and Barrett persist with that?
I still don't think that has, in the big games, I'd still have Barrett there. I think Ben Schmidt could have made a difference for them back there. I just think he's a brilliant footballer, and I'm surprised. Like, he's obviously probably gone beyond that now. Ferg, I think, talked a bit about Rico. Was it you that was talking about Rico Ione?
Something on Friday, maybe.
It wasn't on Friday, no. But I think you mentioned that
I
it was
wasn't
kind
invited to this gig on Friday. Unfortunately,
no, there was one
against the left wing.
Right, you appreciate it.
There was one on the because you were mentioning. Do you remember when Bridge made the break against Ireland, and he now a terrible missed tackle by Stockdale and a terrible defence defence by Ireland previously off the scrum. But I think you mentioned, like, I think if that's Ioane, he probably goes the whole way. And I just felt like maybe some of the personnel stuff, while very, very good players, did New Zealand have one guy like that was just like, usually they have a guy where you're like, geez, he's unstoppable.
Even Surveyor in his prime, kind of that type of...
Or even the centre combination, they had Nonu and Conrad Smith. Now, I think those two guys would get better. I like Leonard Brown. I think he looks really good. But
they're nowhere near the
No,
yeah.
exactly. So, like, when we say, like, how good they were, are we actually saying, like, how bad were Ireland maybe was probably a more apt kind of description of that, and maybe they hadn't really been tested. I thought they looked good, for periods against South Africa, but they kept throwing it around. And a better defence, I think England have a better defence than South Africa. I thought they made them look fairly ordinary in attack. So I thought there was lots of things for them to maybe mull over and to say, Jesus, like, was there, is there something we need to rethink here? Are some of the personnel, were we picking the right people? And yeah, I think it'll leave them with some wounds that are pretty deep, and they'll have some serious soul searching, I think, after it.
I think the big one that stood out for me was previously in massive games, World Cup games, Rugby Championship games, when New Zealand were under the pump in the November series against teams, when the game is in the balance and there was like these one or two big moments. Those big moments, they almost lost every time against England, which was the most impressive thing mentally from that English side's performance, in my opinion. There was a couple of times they broke them down. They looked like they're getting over the gain line. It was either Underhill or Curry got over the ball. Massive turnovers.
Tackles as well.
Yeah, then the other one was when New Zealand started quite well in the second half, and Whitelock gave away that penalty for slapping Farrell in the face. Just stuff like that New Zealand teams in the past in really tight matches wouldn't normally do. And I felt those big moments that England definitely got on top in that area. And
as well, like, you'd have to say, I thought Underhill had a few tackles for that were just like... Do you remember, I think New Zealand just got the try, and I think it goes to Barrett. Was there a kick through? It goes to Barrett at the back, Geordie, and he sidesteps one guy, and you're like, oh, something could be on here. He then goes to take contact with Underhill, and he just, boom, flattens him and knocks the ball out. I'm just thinking, those big momentum turners, as you say, like, England forced them as well as New Zealand actually, really, like, some serious blow-ups from them as well, so...
Then they had Iran Watson, there was another big turnover as well, where New Zealand, the game wasn't fully away from them, still had around 10 minutes left, and Watson got over the ball when either Perinara or Schmidt went through and got caught alone, and Watson, the six from Newcastle, came on.
Wilson. Oh, Wilson, yeah. That was a great turnover. Sorry, that was brilliant.
Brilliant turnover. And just a really big moment from a bench player that, they call them, some coaches call them the finishers these days, which is kind of a nice way of putting a bench player, really. If they're such a good player, they'd be starting. Like,
exactly.
That's what Joe Schmidt was telling me the whole time. Yeah, you're a finisher for put you on the bench. But... the likes of him coming on, making such a huge difference, and even Slade, he had some lovely touches, few lovely lines. They just have a great 23 there. There's probably one or two the others they could pick from the squad. Ellis Genge is a great player. They look really, really strong going into this final. But the one thing I will say about South Africa is they're going to just really try and frustrate. Because Rassie Erasmus was very good with Munster when he probably didn't have the firepower that South Africa have in that pack. But the style of rugby they played under him when they're playing at best, it was quite frustrating to play against. There was a lot of kicking, very confrontational, and it's just the perfect style for that group of South African players. So I'd say it could be a bit of a disappointing final in terms of, like, from a spectator's point of view, in terms of excitement going from New Zealand, England. So I think it'll be a little bit more of a tight, like a closer score than
how much of a chance would you give South Africa? Like, obviously the game against Wales was, as Brooke said, as a neutral, it was pretty poor to watch. A lot of kicking, but they have so much power there. They've been going with 6 forwards in the bench, which says it all. And even after the game, Erasmus was basically saying, this final isn't going to be won with a lot of great tries. Or I don't think it is, haha, even though it's obviously what he is.
I'm definitely planning for that. I don't think I think the physical kind of confrontational game, they have excellent kickers. Willie Leroux at the back is an excellent footballer. A bit loose at times, but it's still, I think, an excellent footballer. It looks like Colby's going to be back, so he's a threat. But the boys in the centre are big fellas. And as you say, that 6-2 split on the bench, if they do go with that, like you're looking at Francois Lowe, you're looking at Malcolm Marks on the bench there. Like, you've got some quality operators and some big men. Can't remember the name of that second row. He's a huge man.
And Mostert.
Yeah, like big men, So I don't think, as I said earlier on, South Africa are not going to be bullied, by that confrontational game, and they will get off the line regardless. That's Nina Barr's defence. Like, just get off the line. And England will have to produce something special, and I think my only concern with England is actually that 10-12 axis. I thought forward, it was a really brave decision to pick him against New Zealand. I thought it was a mistake. I was wrong, clearly. He got a brilliant platform, and he's great when he's got a big platform in front of him. Against South Africa, it's really harsh, but I would 100% be picking Farrell at 10 and Slade at 13. I just think it's a better balance for the team in a tight game. I know he looked brilliant there, but I just feel like because I think he'll get exposed by some of the big ball carriers. I don't think.
Well, you see, New Zealand went after Ford, and the one thing about Ford is he does make his.
He's a good player.
He doesn't
I thought Farrell didn't have a good game though. I thought Farrell was only okay in the game.
But he was running on one leg for most of it. He was like, I don't know. I thought it was too good a performance not to pick the exact same team again.
I completely agree with you. Yeah. But I think he's made a brave decision to pick him against New Zealand. I think the brave decision is actually to put him back on the bench. I know it's a terrible thing to say after such a break. I know it would be just heartbreaking for the guy, and it's not going to happen. I don't think it's going to happen. But I'm telling you, it's a better decision to play Farrell 10. Just defensively, it could be a tight game. He's a better kicker off the deck than Ford, and I think I don't think he plays great rugby at 12. I'm on the record as saying he's a pretty average international 12. He's a brilliant 10. I just love Farrell's one of my favourite players, but he's a 10.
When you say you don't think he plays good rugby, you think he's what?
Average. I think he doesn't. He's an average enough defender. Like, he comes in with a big enough hit every now and then, but he never sticks. He misses lots of tackles from bouncing off guys because he doesn't stick. They're way easier tackles. You're tackling. It's easier tackles in 10. It's way more attritional in 12. I feel like he doesn't have much of a game. He doesn't have a game breaking running game, which is very important to have as a 12. I think Slade brings a bit of both. He's got a nice little kicking game. He's a nice handler of the football, but he can also break it down.
Yeah, but I see my debate against that would be that I think Tuolangi is a better defending 13 than Slade. Because you saw the way England shut down New Zealand in most of that game, particularly when they had a couple of overlaps. Tuolangi just coming in, he making beautiful decisions there. Remember the one he came out the back? Did he hit Ritalik or someone out the back of one of those shapes, smashed him behind the gain line? Yeah. And then a couple of times he just got there in the passing channel to actually deter
the pass. They couldn't get it out, so it was brilliant. He was definitely right.
Mwanga was just looking out there, and he just dumped the ball back inside to the traffic with the likes of Sinclair, Itoje banging them behind the gain line. So I think from that perspective,
could you play Slade 12? You wouldn't play him there?
Well, Jones definitely, they wouldn't put him in 12.
Yeah, sorry, they won't for the final. Sorry, I'm more just thinking, I think it's a better combination for them. I think they're more physical. Against Delanda as well, like, he's an absolute beast,
Yeah.
I just think if I was him, I'd be thinking, right, good luck now for every single time I'm going to get the ball. I'm not thinking of passing. I'm just wrapping that thing up. He's a very big hitter though, man. He hits well. He doesn't stick though. At 12, it's a different ball game at 12. Like, you've got guys coming at angles. You're kind of the 10 is usually like you're guided by what's in front of you, whereas 12 has to figure out what 10 is doing before he's making a hit as well. Whereas less so at 10. 10 is kind of just, you just don't want to make a bad decision in there. You're just kind of guiding. If it's a tackle, it's usually straightforward who it is, and you hit the first person. 12 is away. The footwork is different. And I think they're heavier carriers and better carriers. Usually the centres are usually the best carriers in tight spaces, and they're usually big men. I just don't like Farrell there. I'd love him at 10. He's one of my favourite players to watch at 10, but I think you're right. I think they're going to pick forward, but I think that could be a mistake.
Yeah, interesting to keep an eye on that. And just to go back to the other semi-final, and just to focus on Wales for a second, obviously it's kind of the end of an era for Warren Gatland, albeit they have this third place playoff to play. did they leave something out there, do you think? Like, they didn't play great. The momentum was with them towards the end. But overall, did they do enough, do you think, to get to a final?
I think Wales were, obviously with Ireland gone, they were an easier team to get behind than South Africa for me, but just the style of rugby they play. I think, to be fair to Gatland, I've never been coached under or anything like that, and some guys have different opinions on him that have been on Lions tours, certainly that have come back to Ireland from there, that have been coached under Gatland. But in fairness to the man, he gets 110% out of all the players that he seems to coach for whatever reason. And I think if you actually go through the team sheet that was playing against South Africa on the Sunday, like, there's a good few players there that don't have that much exposure at test level, and they played outstandingly well. And even to keep the game that tight for what it was, and to for a couple of refereeing decisions and maybe one or two other things that could have gone their way, they easily could have come away with a win there. And I felt a little bit sorry for Gatland, because it would have been an amazing way for him to go out, because even getting to a final, first time a Welsh side ever got to a World Cup final, would have been pretty cool. But on the flip side, I don't think it'll happen, but Wales have never beaten New Zealand with Warren Gatland. It's the one test side he hasn't beaten, so that would be a pretty nice way for him to go out, but I really can't see it.
Yeah, what's kind of, people ask him what's his legacy. He's been there for 12 years. It's a lifetime ago, really. It was after the 07 World Cup when he first came in. He's had a lot of Grand Slam success. 2 World Cup semi-finals. We killed for that in Ireland. You've been coached by him as well, or on the same lines to him. Yeah,
look, I really like him. You hear some differing. He seems like a bit of a Marmite character for some people. I suppose maybe not that there was any favouritism or anything like that in terms of selection, clearly, but I got on well because my dad would have had a relationship with Warren anyway and would have played against him and propped against him and stuff. So, he would have been in the front row against him. Excuse me. So I actually always got on well with him. Thought he was a nice guy. Kind of quiet, kept to himself, and kind of ruthless. I liked some of the decisions. Like, I loved as much as
jumping on Driscoll.
Yeah, I thought that was really brave. And actually probably the right decision at that time. As much as it would have been really difficult for Driscoll to accept that, but it probably was. Jonathan Davies was an outstanding footballer. I thought that was a brilliant decision, really brave. And he's done lots of them throughout his career. Like, he's been really ruthless at times when he's had to be. I think his legacy with Wales will be, very, they reached a really high level for a very long period of time without much support from the provincial system, really. I mean, that hasn't been that strong. They've really kind of flattered.
Win percentage is pretty incredible for a 12-year period. Yeah. Because you see a lot of coaches that go into coaching like test rugby sides. Not that they lose the changing room or anything like that, but and that's not to say that the likes of Joe Schmidt did that, but I think there's a period where a coach can get the most out of a group of players, and to get 12 years out of it, to get 12 years out of Wales playing, as Lukey said, to that level is an incredible achievement.
Yeah, one Grand Slam per World Cup cycle he won, so that's kind of along the way he's been winning Six Nations at every turn, pretty much.
Yeah,
exactly, and then being having the ability then to flip over and coach, those successful Lion sides. And I know that we didn't come away with that win in New Zealand, but very closely did. And there's mixed opinions on a few players that came back from there. But at the end of the day, you're judged on your results, and not many people would have given the Lions a chance going over on that tour. And Warren Gatland very nearly came away with it with a series win. So
and the South African one was
his record speaks for itself.
The South African one was a flip of a coin as well. Like that was an unbelievable South African team. As much as you say, maybe McCall moved on for the last one, but Jesus, that's South African.
It's better than this team that are in the final.
Oh, that South African team was unbelievable. Yeah. That was like they. Remember the Tri Nations the year before, like they smashed everyone in that as well. Home and away, I think they beat
the All Blacks 3 times after that tour.
Yeah, they were unbelievable, that team. So like that, and that was a really, really close run thing. Do you know what I do love about him is that, like, look, he's been successful everywhere he's been. Waikato, was that the first time in 30 years they won the NPC or something like that? Like, that was a huge win, put him on the map as a coach. But Wasps, he was brilliant there. Ireland, he was excellent as well. But like, it's the consistency throughout. Like, he's been successful everywhere he's gone. I love that he picked a brand of rugby and just decided. He just stuck with it. He was like, he's one of those coaches that strikes me as a guy. He's like, okay, what have I got? Okay, I think this will work with this group of players. And he just. I don't think he worries overly about the opposition. He seems like a kind of guy who picks one or two things that the opposition are good at. We really focus on trying to take those things away. With Ireland, it was always, when they went into the air, like he's a great record against Joe Schmidt, I think, in the really tough games, the big ones. So they always pick like one or two things like that. But he stuck to his principles, and I think the players love that about him.
It'd be interesting to see what he's like. He's going to the Chiefs now. Obviously, Super Rugby is a lot different style to maybe what Warren Ball would be up in the Northern Hemisphere. It'd be interesting to see if he does have a more expansive game plan, or if he tries to import what he did.
It's a simple structure, though, Ferg, isn't it? Like I don't think you don't have to play. Like I think Wales probably don't have the really creative guys, and like New Zealand teams will have like unbelievable runners and ball players everywhere. Like if you play that game, it can look really good.
There's times though that I played against Wales under Gatland and they did throw the ball around. I think, when their backline was at its most potent, when George North first came on the scene, they still had Mike Phillips floating around, and Bigger was playing probably his best rugby. Davies had just come, had broken onto the scene for a couple of seasons at the centre. He was playing some of his best rugby as well. Scott Williams was playing particularly well.
Yeah, great player.
And Halfpenny was, one of the best fullbacks in the world. They threw the ball around a lot more back then, and I think maybe they got away from that in the last few seasons. But I suppose his template for what he does, as Luke said, he hasn't changed it much. And yeah, it will be interesting to see, because the Super 15 teams, I'm not so sure that will be the best way of or the best theory for getting the most out of the group of players he'll have down there. He'll have more skillful guys, maybe not as physical, attritional kind of guys in the pack. So I don't know who he's got with his backroom team, but we talked about his record there. I've no doubt he'll probably do well when he goes down there as well.
Yeah, just to move on to maybe some of the fallout from Ireland before we finish up with predictions and stuff like that. Obviously, you mentioned it earlier. Brian O'Driscoll and Easton Asiwa have been commentating on the team and the exit from the World Cup and the style of play, and talking about kind of the contrast with how Leinster have been playing and maybe how Leinster have been training the players in terms of Stuart Lancaster and the focus on unstructured rugby versus Joe Schmidt, which is very, very structured and regimented, and then maybe going back between the two styles caused some sort of as I think I just said, upsetting the apple cart. I don't know.
I know. To be honest with you, I was amazed. Like both of those guys have been very consistently supportive of Joe for a very long period of time. And you'd almost say, particularly Isa would have been a disciple of his. Really, I would have thought. Would have, I suppose, pushed hard for him to get the job initially. And it proved to be great, like a great bit of advice, and in terms of recommending someone. Like he's been brilliant for Irish rugby. Very surprising. Can't say I thought that it was down to a Leinster thing. I thought that was kind of an interesting tint to it. I'm sure they must have been talking to some of the more senior guys in the squad, because it's the only way something like that could come out. And those two would probably only be friendly with probably people from that side of the camp as well. So you'd have to think there's something's probably come out there. I would say it's surprising to me. I think what was surprising mostly was that it came from a Leinster kind of lens. Now, I know Leinster have been playing brilliant rugby the last couple of years and have been the standout province, but there was lots of guys from other teams that were a big loss in terms of playing expansive rugby. Like Simon Zebo was a big loss in terms of throwing the ball around. And I thought there was probably a few injuries and things like that didn't help things. I think I was just it was a weird week. I thought I was less, but probably before the weekend I would have had my mind set on actually calling it very much like I saw it. But subsequently from the fallout, I actually was less inclined to really stick the boot into Joe, to be honest with you. And I always think a bit of balance is good in these circumstances. I feel like he probably got let down a lot by like basic handling errors as well. It looked like a really bland, and really boring style of rugby. But like, it was some games that looked really good. Against Scotland, it looked really good. Japan, like the conditions were pretty tricky, but they kind of like New Zealand, they dropped the ball at like pretty much every single juncture in the game that was crucial and got the ball ripped out of their hands. Like, so I don't know. I felt it was a bit harsh for the two guys, and to put a Leinster lens on it was a bit weird. I thought.
I don't think it's harsh for two guys who know the Leinster setup to look at the way Leinster have been playing, and in particular, the emphasis was on how Stuart Lancaster was coaching the team, and say why can't Ireland do more of that, or why didn't they do more of that? Especially because it was evident from maybe the Six Nations that things maybe had gone a bit stale with the way Ireland were playing.
But Leinster did the same thing. I thought in the crucial parts of last season. Sorry, Ferg, but I thought Leinster did the same thing when it came to playing against teams that were like Saracens particularly, I thought they were very, very direct, and they went very much into the same channels. It reminded me very much of the Irish performances in the Six Nations, and I thought they really sought out contact, whereas they went away from what was really good the year before. Where you have to be brave, you have to take a step back further from the gain line, and you've got a ball play like England did. Like England forwards were ball playing. Leinster did the same thing. I thought it was a bit rich
in
actually.
In the semi-final against Toulouse, though, in the Aviva Stadium this year, Leinster did play a lot of rugby.
But Toulouse are a different ball game.
I don't know if that's. I would agree with you there, Luke. I think if you're taking the Saracens game in isolation, maybe, but the way Joe Schmidt's Irish team have been performing was that had been going on for kind of 9 months. It's been going on throughout the whole Six Nations. It was up and down performances, inconsistencies. Struggled if we didn't score off those power plays from scrum and line out, and then looked a bit lost, to be honest, in terms of a game plan when we didn't score off those things. It would either put the ball in the air or we'd struggle to get over the gain line. Really, we'd struggle to create much between the forwards and backs, the interlinking play between the forwards and backs, whereas the flip side is, and the thing is, the likes of Dan McFarland seems to have brought a nice brand of rugby up to Ulster as well, but I'm just speaking about Leinster because I'm being coached in Leinster. But what Stu has done in Leinster, I think the biggest strength he's brought there has been our multi-phase play. Forget about the move off set piece, off scrum or line out. We might get the ball off a kick, off a turnover. That's when we're at our most potent, and it's because of the way we're training. And I just don't think that the Irish team under Joe Schmidt, they didn't evolve with the way they were training over the course of maybe 4 or 5 seasons. It was the same type of sessions. All the emphasis was on the set piece plays, the scrums, the lineouts, and it worked for a long period of time. But as I said earlier on the show, there's a lifetime to certain coaches getting the most out of their teams if you don't move forward or change something, and I feel like he didn't.
I think the interesting thing about what you say there is, and having listened to like a lot of Leinster guys do interviews over the last 18 months, 2 years, is they would always rave about the way they're being trained by Stuart Lancaster. Yeah. Whereas previously it would probably be Joe that they were raving about being coached by. So maybe after a certain period, as Ferg says, if you're being taught the same thing for 4, 5, 6 seasons, and someone else comes in and maybe brings you a different direction that you prefer playing, or it's been very effective, I think it's reasonable for the lads to to ask the question.
No, sorry, it is.
I think there's merit.
It didn't sound like they were asking the question. It sounded like they were kind of, I think, filtering through information that they had probably got from inside the camp. And I my gut feeling on that one was, well, if you'd actually held on to the ball and not dropped it so much, you probably could have played an expansive game. There's no way you can. We'll never know, because basically they were looking for contact rather than looking for holes.
We held on to the ball against Japan though, and there was just we didn't look like we were going anywhere, because it wasn't. You say we could play an expansive game plan, but we didn't do that. Yeah. We got into the 22. It was just hitting the forwards off 9, or maybe one pass plays off 10, into like a much smaller Japanese side that were knocking us behind the gain line. And we, I don't know if we scored a try in that game. Did we?
2 tries, 2 from kicks in the first half.
Two from kicks.
Jack Carty's kicks.
And the dodgy chip, that was the other one was nice. Yeah, sorry, I do get the point. I suppose I'm less inclined. My as soon as I feel like everyone, like the wolf pack is on someone, I'm kind of saying because I've been saying this for a long time about them, probably what the lads have been saying.
I don't think the Wolfpack is on though. I think at the end of the day, Luke, we said on the show last week, we said like Joe Schmidt brought Irish rugby to new levels. Yeah, and there's no debating that he did do that. 3 Six Nations, one Grand Slam, first win down in Australia, almost getting a first series win down in South Africa, beating New Zealand twice. We'd never beaten them before. That speaks for itself. But at the end of the day, if you're going to call it as it is, the fact of the matter is that the team probably didn't evolve from 2018 much, and other teams did, and that was our shortfalling, really.
I can't argue with that. Yeah. And I was saying, Phil, how long have I been saying they're looking for contact all the time? They're playing, they're not trying things, they're having trouble with someone else outside of Johnny Sexton or Conor Murray passing the ball, like getting the ball to good places. And I think they had some selection issues as well. Like they didn't pick people who were going to be playing expansive rugby either. Particularly at fullback. Like they didn't. Like they went. Rob Kearney is brilliant defensively in terms of the air. But like, is he really going to light the world on fire in attack? That's not why you're picking him. You're picking him because you want solidity back there and security. Jordan Larmour was a selection for that. So like, I think it's not just down to one side of things. I've been saying it for a while, but maybe I just feel like, and in fact there was lots of other articles out about Joe. There was a bit of stuff out.
But in terms of these two specifically,
I was surprised at it. I didn't completely disagree with everything they were saying, but I thought it was weird to have a Leinster
disciples. Then like you take it more seriously. Like if it's two guys who do back him all the time, then if they're saying it, then surely you must think there actually should be more validity to it than it's someone with an axe to grind. Like
that's right, and that's a fair point as well. Will, I don't know. I feel bad. I felt bad for him in some ways because I feel like he puts a huge amount of time into the thing, and I kind of just thought like, look, at the end of the day, it was really hard to really decipher whether the game plan was against New Zealand particularly was actually that bad, because the basics and the fundamentals of the game they got completely wrong, and they got smashed in defence. Their defence was terrible. So I don't know. Like maybe I just looked at it that way, saying I saw these issues with the game. I didn't see a problem with the attack bar they couldn't hang on to the ball. Like, do you know what I mean?
It's funny on the kind of the Leinster part of the kind of comments, because Leo Cullen was put to Leo Cullen, and his reaction, it sounded like he thought it was a criticism almost, even though I thought it was more of just like, why can't they play a bit more like Leinster in a complimentary way? But he was like kind of seemed to take it as some sort of criticism.
Yeah, I don't know. I'd say he's probably like, I'm sure he works closely enough with Joe. Yeah. I know that I'm sure there's difficult parts of that relationship, particularly with some, like say the likes of Joey Carberry situation. I'm sure it didn't play out great, and from look, Leinster have done very well subsequently, and lots of guys have come on and fill those boots. But like Joey Carberry would have, I think, hurt Leinster. I think they were a bit disappointed with how he was treated and how the club was treated, having brought him through the ranks. So I'm sure there's been a few flashpoints here and there. But I would still say Joe, or like Leo, probably would have lent on a lot of Joe's philosophies and thinkings around the game. So I'm sure and as a coach, he knows how fickle it is and how quickly it turns. I'd say it'd be very unlikely for Leo to stick the boot in, or even if you ask Stuart Lancaster about it, like he's seen
stick the boot in if he's not on the field.
Yeah, exactly. He didn't mind when he was on it, but like Stuart Lancaster knows, like how, like we've been building him up since he's come over here, and he's been brilliant for Leinster, brought them on to another level. But he's seen the other side where he got completely decimated after the last World Cup, after that loss against Wales. So asking those people about what they think about it, like you're probably going to get some fairly bland reactions or some fairly weird reactions to that, because they'd be fairly sensitive to that, having been in the same situation.
Yeah, and at least our new head coach hasn't been involved in 2 World Cup tobacco's in the last 4 years.
Look, I think do you know what I will say about that guy? I've only met him a few times. Seems like a really good bloke. He will, if he can't get people all on the same page, I don't know who can. So I think that's definitely something he'll be able to do.
One last topic before we finish up, guys, is now that the international players are coming back, and you guys have both been in this camp before, coming back from a World Cup, having to integrate back into a provincial setup, because it's a strange period for these guys. Like the World Cup has been the focus for 4 years, yet it's come at the start of the season. There's a massive letdown, but you have to come back in. There's Champions Cup games to be played. You're kind of in a weird purgatory. You've had the biggest part of your season at the very start of your season. Like, what's that like when you come back from a World Cup and you do have to hit the ground, running again?
In 2011, I hadn't played much rugby at the World Cup, and there was a couple of other Leinster guys in that boat as well. Leo Cullen, ironically, was one of them as well, and a few others. But then there was another bunch of guys who had played an awful lot of rugby over there. Decky was playing pretty much the same team every week, and we got it knocked out in the quarters again. But I don't know. I felt it was actually a bit of a springboard for a lot of us coming back. We ended up winning the Heineken Cup in 2012. It was a great year. We lost, unfortunately, in the league final, but we won the Heineken Cup against Ulster and Twickenham, and I felt refreshed coming back, because it had been a bit of a frustrating period for me over there. I'd only played one game, and there's one or two other guys who were in the same boat. And, guys from Ulster, Connacht, Paddy Wallace was another guy who went over there, hadn't played much, but we went back, and he was playing very well for Ulster that year, and they did get to the Heineken Cup final. But, it can go two ways, but I think the pros that Irish team have, young and old now, particularly come back into, I can only speak from Leinster's perspective, how well I know them and how good they are on and off the field, that they'll be dying to get back. Obviously, getting out of that environment, a losing environment really for them over the past period of time in general has been probably disappointing for them, and they'll just be looking to get stuck back into the Leinster setup and make sure that they get their names on the team sheet, because when they've been gone, there's been some really great young guys putting their hands up, and that's the culture we're building. It's the guys who are playing the best in their positions who are going to get picked. So there's going to be no handing of jerseys back. Guys are going to have to earn them. So that's the way you got to do it.
You come back in great shape as well, don't you? Like, especially if you haven't played that much. Like I was the same. I hadn't played that much as well. And like, you get yourself in serious condition for World Cups. It's a great way of focusing the mind. So if you don't play that much, it's brilliant. I found as well, it's brilliant coming back in. It was just because, again, the disappointment.
It's not like, more rugby.
You're dying to get back in there.
It's like a new setup. It's a new setup, and it's like a new group, and it's also a group that you're unbelievably close to, but you hadn't seen for ages, so you're excited to catch up with them, train with them, play with them again. So
bring a new buzz as well.
Lots of positive. It's exactly what this, the guys have had from all provinces. I think they've had a week or two off, which you'd need to refresh and just take some time from not going to the gym, running, whatever. But I'm sure they're all dying to get stuck back into what would be European rugby in around 3 weeks' time.
But what about the mental adjustment? When you lose in another quarter-final, in every case, actually 11, 15, and this year, like, to come back in, is that difficult?
Well, you're right. That's right. I don't think it is. I think you're kind of saying, particularly if you haven't had, it's probably trickier for people who've had a heavy block of rugby, with the pre-season, and again, traditionally the Irish coaching has been, over the last while anyway, has been very, very conservative. So some people get huge minutes, but others don't really. And I think I was only in the situation, I could speak for myself here, where I was dying to get back in. I hadn't played that much, but I knew I was playing good rugby. I knew I was in good shape. So I was dying to get back in and played some decent rugby. And I was playing a few different positions in that when I came back in, which is a bit awkward. But other than that, I was dying to get back in. I thought the setup was really positive. A really good team. We were didn't win much when I came back in, and it was we had a difficult end to the season, but it was still very exciting to get back in there. And as Ferg said, there's lots of other things like you haven't seen your these are probably people you're very, very close with, haven't seen them in a long time, back amongst your family, friends. You're back in a nice environment, and you're kind of raring to go and get the season going and pick yourself back up. It's a great thing about having, this happen, rather than the end of your seasons happen at the start, where you go, well, look, there's still so much to play for. You got 3 weeks before you're in a European Cup game. Like, how enjoyable is that? I think there's lots to be positive about in terms of the provinces as well. I mean, I'm very interested to see this new, kind of Munster setup. Very, very exciting. I think Dan McFarlane's done some great work up there. He's a renowned, excellent coach, and he looks like he's got them all singing off the same hymn sheet. Connacht, a bit of an unknown quantity still, I think, even though there hasn't been massive changes in personnel or anything like that. Interested to see how they progress. I like every time I hear a friend interviewed, I like how he interviews. Seems very much common sense and likes to play a good brand of rugby. So I'd like to see them improve a little bit on last season's showing. So I think lots of all the people coming back into different provinces, very, very positive environments, and they'll be looking forward to get back in. Even the people with high minutes, because, as I said, even for those people, it's a chance to redeem yourself and something big to play for.
Also, in terms of a confidence hit, like, you can say, we're going to wipe the slate clean, as an Irish team after getting beaten by 50 points in Twickenham, but it's actually extremely hard to do that when you're in the same setup, because at the end of the day, that did happen to that team in that jersey. Whereas when you leave that setup, you go back to your different perspective or respective domestic sides, provincial sides, you can go, we're drawing a line in the sand there. I'm moving forward. I've got great memories from last year. I was playing very well at club level leading into there. So you just put a full stop behind it. So I think a lot of those guys will be happy to just wave goodbye to what was, a World Cup campaign that they want to forget.
And last question on this, in terms of, it's a different kind of way of peaking physically. You have to be really fit at the start of the season. Like, as you get towards the end of this campaign, like, when you guys were involved, did you feel fatigued, much more fatigued than you would have ordinarily? Because usually you have a couple of Pro 14 games to ease yourself into the season. It's not like, playing the All Blacks, playing, a World Cup pool stage. I don't know how either of you feel.
They rest you pretty well, I think. They make sure that the playing loads will be, lighter. There's a few guys that'll have injuries, like Jack Cohn and Joey Carby looks like he's going to be out for a little bit as well. So there's a few people who probably have layoffs there. And I think the people who had played heavy minutes will probably get a bit of a rest. And they'll try and do that sporadically during the season, because they'll know, they look at the cumulative build-up of minutes. It's not just, little blocks and they go, okay, we need them, we'll prepare for it. They'll actually look at the whole thing and say, look, what's our, 25 games is probably, we don't really want, the injuries that happen or occur, the chances or the probabilities of an injury happening beyond that, very, very large, even if we help manage them through certain blocks. So I think they've got it down to a fine art. They'll have the players, kind of ready to go. And I think they'll manage them well throughout the season. The Irish setups usually do that very well. And particularly, there is a bit of depth there, probably less so in a few of the other provinces. But Leinster particularly, I'd say lots of those people would actually be dying to get back in because they were worried about getting their place, to be honest.
Well, we'll finish up with predictions. England versus South Africa, guys. Will we see another England World Cup win? Or will it be like 2007, an atrocious game that South Africa win 15-6?
It's hard to back against them. They were so good. I think I'll go with an England win.
Will it be a shit match?
It has the potential to be. It really does, because I think South Africa, I don't think a fast game will lend to them. A slower one, where they can kind of impose themselves physically all across the pitch, will suit them, and bring on those 6 forwards at the end to kind of just squeeze the tempo out of the game. But I'm not sure England will let them do that. I think England actually have a better defence than them, and a better kicking game. So I think I'll go with England, even if it's a messy one.
Yeah, I suppose playing it safe is going for England, but I think it'll be a tight game, actually. I think, as I said at the start of the show, there won't be much rugby played. I think Rassie Erasmus is a very clever coach with the resources he ever has. He does the right things with the clientele he has, and Felix Jones will be backing that up. But I think that England will be able to get around them. I think that they do come up very hard, but the structure of their D isn't as good as England, and I think that they'll be able to get them on the edge with a few of those wraparound plays with Ford and Farrell coming out the back of those shapes off the pods, from 10 to that pod out the back from the likes of St. Clair or Toge. So I think England will win, but it'll be in around a 1-score game.
And very last question, the big one of the weekend, the third place playoff. New Zealand versus Wales.
I think New Zealand will win that one, even though they'll be very disinterested, I'm sure. I think New Zealand for that one.
I'll go for the fairy tale story and say Wales, just to disagree with Luke.
I'd say it'll be 15 other than the All Blacks. On that note, Luke, Ferg, thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks, Will.
Cheers.
That's all we have time for this week on The Left Wing in association with Ali. Thank you so much for listening. We will be back next week with another podcast reviewing the World Cup final between England and South Africa. And in the meantime, you can subscribe to us on iTunes, SoundCloud, or listen on independent.ie. So until next week, thank you for listening and goodbye.
The Left Wing Podcast in association with Aldi. Spend €30 in store for a chance to win €50,000 for your primary school.